Hello and welcome to episode number 10, our last episode of our Women's Health series. And we are super excited to have Jennifer Woodward on our show. We've had her on our podcast at least a couple times that I remember. She is from Functional Diagnostic Nutrition, and she talks all about women's hormones and how diet can affect that. And we're going to be talking to her about mental health and hormones today. So Jennifer, welcome to our show.
Thank you for having me.
And tell us a little bit about your background and why you are excited to talk about this subject.
Great. Yes. So I am a mom. I have a family. I have 4 children. I've been married to my high school sweetheart now for 22 years, believe it or not. I know. I am a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner. I've been in the perimenopause space for 10 years now, worked with over 1,000 clients with their perimenopause issues. I have my master's in integrative science and love diving into hormones and nutrition and how it can affect women, especially in this perimenopausal and menopausal stage of life.
And I can tell you, we've interviewed maybe not thousands, but hundreds of people from all over the world and talked a lot about women's health. And I have never, ever heard somebody explain a woman's cycle from the follicular phase to the luteal phase better than you have. I learned so much in that 3 minutes.
Thank you. I do tend to talk for a while. I'll try to keep it short.
Yeah. So, mental health and hormones or perimenopause, menopause. Tell us, I know you've maybe experienced this yourself. I'm sure you've counseled a lot of women on it. Let's dive into it.
Absolutely. So with women in perimenopause, and this can start anytime from age 35 to age 45. It can last for 15 years. So we've talked about this before, but a lot of women don't realize that they're sliding into that perimenopausal phase of life. They're hit with all of these symptoms suddenly, and they think they're going crazy. So they go to their doctor, they go to their chiropractor, they go to their OBGYN and ask, what's wrong with me? Why am I raging at my husband? Why am I so angry with my children? Why do I experience this depression or anxiety that I've never really dealt with in the past? And, a lot of physicians just aren't really trained on perimenopause. So I hear a lot from my clients, and my doctor offered me the pill, they offered me Prozac. And, these women realize they're not actually depressed because it's more of a situational thing. It will come and go. And we can talk about the hormonal, kind of genesis for that going forward. However, women realize this is something new. I have not historically been a depressed person, an anxious person, and I certainly haven't been a ragey, stabby person. So I'm not exactly sure what's going on, with my mental health, but it starts to make them really nervous because, most women, they're working, they have a family, they have a significant other, and they start to worry in perimenopause that these mood swings, these mental health shifts might negatively affect their relationships.
I bet you Janet has some things to add to this with your experience with some women, right?
I do. In fact, it's actually quite scary to me because I feel and I sense their situation, because some of them have, they're a mess when they come in. They're like, I'm not crazy. I'm not psychotic. I'm not depressed. I just need to get a handle on what's happening. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And they realize that their response to something that they had been able to handle in the past is not correct. So they're just trying to correct their responses, right? They're trying to get a handle on it before they just, like you say, act differently than what they have in the past. So they realize that there is a change in them, but like you said, it's not all the time. Like sometimes it's just fine, but then all of a sudden they reach a point where it's like it's not, and it's their reality that they realize there's something they need to do. But the sad thing is what they're given when they do go in to talk to somebody is absolutely off the chart for me. I mean, why would you offer somebody an antidepressant for someone who is actually describing a situation that isn't depression?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're not describing depression.
Mm-hmm.
And they're really not describing psychotic behavior either. I mean, that's the other thing. I've had women that have been offered antipsychotics and they're like, no, I no, right? So it's a real thing. And I probably hear something at least once a day.
I definitely believe you. When I put polls out to my people on social media, Instagram, Facebook, and ask them what are some of the top symptoms that you're struggling with in perimenopause, the top two that pop up are anxiety and rage, actually. So this is something different for a lot of these like rather mild mannered, sweet women who are just going through their life, doing their thing, and all of a sudden they find themselves almost snapping at kids or husband. Most of them can keep it together enough to not snap at a coworker, but everything falls apart, when they're at home and in their normal, natural environment. And I think we should talk about some of the predecessors. Why is this happening to women in this stage of life? And one of the reasons that I see is that women, especially these days, and again, we've talked about this in past shows, they are expected to do everything. They really are. They go through school, they get a career, they raise a family, they are homemakers, they take care of children. And there are so many demands on a woman's time and a woman's space that something has to give. And a lot of women are still trying to, diet. They're still trying to exercise or going to their, 5 a.m. Orange Theory classes, not realizing that all of those things stacked up on top of each other are absolutely going to have an impact on their mental health. And not for the reasons that we think. It's not just because women are feeling overwhelmed. It's because there is a hormonal response to over stressing, over dieting, over exercising, and being overtired. And what happens in this phase in life is women naturally are going to be experiencing estrogen shifts in the perimenopause transition. So sometimes, and we see this on the Dutch test or blood work, sometimes estradiol can be incredibly high, during the perimenopausal transition. And sometimes it can be incredibly low. But that wildly fluctuating estrogen can absolutely lead to mood swings in women, coupled with the lowering progesterone levels of the perimenopause transition. This is one of the hallmarks of perimenopause is we, start to sputter with our ovulation. And so we know that ovulation is necessary in order to create progesterone. When the ovulation doesn't happen for a month, 2 months, 3 months, women don't have access to that very calming, relaxing, soothing progesterone. On top of that, I'm sure you guys see this as well. I see a lot of women who have been on birth control, IUD, a pill, years or decades, not realizing that they've spent 30 years now in this progesterone deficiency. So when now estrogen levels are peaking and progesterone levels are continuing to decline, they experience all of the fallout of not having those progesterone levels at optimal levels for, 10, 15, 20, 30 years.
And it's worth repeating. We've done it on a few of these episodes, at least one episode, maybe a couple of them during this series, but it's worth repeating. That's just one of the reasons why Janet and I would never, ever recommend birth control pills. Early on in our pharmacy career, we did, Janet took them actually, but we have seen it ruin so many women's lives and cycles. We would never, ever recommend birth control pills.
I love to hear that. I feel the same way. I get a lot of questions because in perimenopause, we women in our 30s, 40s, and 50s, we have teenage daughters. And so women reach out to me and ask me, what do I do for my daughter's acne? What do I do for her skipped or heavy periods? The doctor's recommending birth control. And I tell her, well, get informed first, realize, that these can have long-term implications on a female's health, or there are things that we can do naturally in the meantime to help mitigate some of those symptoms. But we also don't realize that birth control robs us of these very calming hormones, calming minerals. So it robs us of zinc and magnesium and B6. And if I were to put together a supplement cocktail to help a woman feel more balanced and relaxed in perimenopause, it would include those three things: zinc, B6, and also magnesium. They're just very calming to the body. So when we rob the body of those three vitamins and minerals, we've, by being on birth control for an extended period of time, and we're not eating, an optimal diet, we're surviving on shakes and Arbonne and isogenics and intermittent fasting and one meal a day. These women are just so depleted, and then further depleting nutrients through taking the pill for a long time. It's no wonder that, in perimenopause, our mental health starts to fall apart. We kind of set ourselves up for it unknowingly. But there are things that we can do, right? There are many interventions that we can start to put into play immediately. Most of them them are pretty inexpensive and easy to do, they can start reversing some of those feelings of anxiety, depression, rage, or even feeling like, you're at the end of your rope and about to have a mental break. On that note, we should say, if that is you, please reach out to a health professional. Please reach out to, a mental health professional or a clergy member. But if this is just a cyclical thing that's happening and you're starting to get worried about it, there are natural interventions that we can put into play immediately.
Absolutely. And one of them that, and this is my and Janet's field, one of them that we would talk about regularly is progesterone. You talked about during the perimenopause years, when you start having cyclical issues, it's usually lack of progesterone. So, and progesterone is one of the best calming hormones around. It actually is a neurohormone that goes into our brain to help just relax our brain, how it modulates on the neurotransmitter GABA. So progesterone is great for that, along with many other things. Jen, do you have any comments on that?
I agree. I think progesterone's huge. I think the supplementation is really important because many of us have went through taking the pill for so many years. And so we are depleted. But I also want to tell women too, emotions are natural. Like we should have emotions. And I think our culture's tried to put us in this box of saying, no, you always have to be like stoic and just be in control of everything. So I really encourage a lot of my patients to find somebody. I mean, one thing that really helped me is somebody that was, a little bit older than me to be able to bounce, how did you feel? What, just to talk to somebody. And I think that makes a big difference because then we're not an island to ourselves, right? We're not alone. And I think that's one of the things that I hear is that people just kind of draw into themselves like, oh my gosh, I can't share this. I can't say, well, maybe not your immediate friends. Maybe that's okay. I get it. But you should reach out to other people and just talk because conversations open up avenues. It's not like we're telling people that we're, going off the deep end. What we're really expressing is what's happening to us. And I think opening the conversation brings in people to our lives that are like, oh yeah, I experienced this. Oh, this, and I think that's part of our culture too. It's like, you're supposed to always be in control. And this is a time where it's probably better to reach out to someone and talk and discuss things with other people.
And I'm going to piggyback off that, just being from the husband standpoint, is that talking about the emotional part is that, we do want women to have emotions. We do want our wife to have emotions. We do want our spouse to respond to things that women are supposed to respond to. So the last thing we want is a woman to be prescribed antidepressants like SSRIs and then just have a flat effect and not care. That's not what we want.
I love that you guys bring up this piece. I think it's so pertinent for women because you're both right. Janet, you said, women are just kind of taught to repress their emotions. And it's part of that cycle, where women we go to school, we get our career, we're groomed to be little men, basically. And, men by design aren't as emotional as women are, which is a good thing because they're meant to do different things, different roles in society. Women have cycles, right? And so paying attention to the natural cycles of a woman can be very, very important. For instance, during the luteal phase, the second phase of her cycle, as progesterone levels are supposed to rise, she's supposed to be a little bit calmer. But women who don't have sufficient progesterone levels, might need to go in and get tested, might need to go on progesterone supplementation, but also might need to protect that time, right? So I love to tell my clients, block off your calendar 3 days before you're supposed to start your period. If you decide you're going to, pick up extra carpool shifts and stay late at work and schedule more appointments and do extra exercise, you are going to have a really rough luteal phase. You are going to feel angry and depressed and anxious. But can you mitigate some of that, overwhelm to help protect your mental health? And it also is a great thing you brought up, Janet. Women are just so isolated these days. When you look at ancestral communities, this is even like 150, 200 years ago, women were surrounded by sisters and aunties and mothers and friends. We lived in this community. And so women would say, oh yeah, me too. Like, oh yeah, I experienced that too. And when I sit down with focus groups with my, my women, do my group coaching, the experience of most women is pretty standard, right? They all are experiencing that, but we women don't want the world to see that, we are struggling because we think it's weakness, when really, as you guys brought up, it's just a natural design for women to be a little bit more emotional. We are supposed to be empathetic. We're supposed to be caregivers. We're supposed to feel things a little bit more deeply. That is our role, in society, to care for children, to care for families. And so when that is not being able to, flourish, it might be a natural result that women feel a little bit depressed or anxious or out of sorts a little bit because they're not able to live to their highest, feminine self. And we should be celebrating that femininity for women and not just trying to, as you said, Janet, kind of push them into this box.
And I can tell you, we've raised 2 grown men now, and I am sure that they're glad that their mother had emotions when they were raising them, and has emotions this day. And they reach out to her for things that they want her to respond to emotionally that they don't want to reach out to me about. And the things that are more non-emotional and just, black and white, that's what they reach out to me for.
But there's something I think that we as women should celebrate, that, our connection is different, but it's also a beautiful connection, right? Like, we shouldn't feel bad that we feel sad for something, or we feel elated for something, or we're excited. I think that is really a gift. It's a gift. And, it does struggle through these times, but, when we have people around us that realize that, or supporting us, sometimes if you feel isolated, you don't hear it. And this is something I've said to many of my women, don't feel like you're an island to yourself, because you're not.
Mm-hmm.
There's somebody else that's just like you that is experiencing the same thing. You just don't realize it because, right now you can't. But like you said, there's help. And hopefully when they reach out for help, that they're finding people that are actually going to help navigate this in a positive way. Because like Shawn said, when they are put on antidepressants, it's flatlined. And I've talked to women like, they've been on it for I don't know how many years, and they're never taken off of it, which is strange. It's like, why are we going to be on antidepressants for the rest of our life until we die? I mean, perimenopause and menopause, going through it is temporary, right? It's not like these changes of peri do not exist into our 80s.
Right. Thank God.
Yeah,
right.
right.
It's true, right? I mean, so why do we treat it like it's going to?
Well, and that's another good point just on the medical front. You guys can probably speak to this better than I can, but SSRIs also are very depleting to the body. So they're robbing the body of, the ribose, the materials that the body needs in order to make ATP, to get mitochondrial energy, to feel like you have, resilience and energy. When you're put on an antidepressant and you stay on an antidepressant for a long period of time, it is robbing you of coenzyme Q10. It's robbing you of these materials that your body needs in order to, create that spark. And so I often will also see my women who've been on the same dose of antidepressants for, 10, 15, 20 years. And the bummer is that they tell me, Jennifer, I'm still depressed. I'm still anxious. I'm still having these, panic attacks. And so what really is that antidepressant doing except masking what's actually going on? And that's what I'm so passionate about doing. And what you guys, I know, are so passionate about doing. Like, what is the reason we're here, right? Depression is not an antidepressant deficiency. I want my women
I was, you know what? You took the words out of my mouth. I was waiting for you to pause so I could say that. They don't lack an antidepressant.
No.
And, it's really, it is that simple. It really is that simple, in my opinion. Now, let's back up a little bit, Jennifer, when you talked about exercise being a stress. So speaking of antidepressants, Jan and I talk about all the time, the best antidepressant ever invented is exercise. So you mentioned, women get up at 5 a.m. to go to Orange Theory being a stressor. I'm assuming you don't want them to stop exercising. So tell us how women should incorporate that into their perimenopause, menopause years to maximize their mental health.
Absolutely. Okay. I am a huge proponent of exercise. I'm not a huge proponent of stressing the nervous system. So I tell my women, a lot of them, again, they're coming from like training for half marathons, getting up to go to Orange Theory, doing high intensity interval workouts. And those are great if you're a dude or if you're a woman in her 20s. But if you are in perimenopause, it starts to be very stressing, very taxing for your nervous system. So what I encourage my women to do is slowly transition to simply walking 10,000 steps a day outside. The literature is there. It shows us that this is effective for weight loss, and it's also effective for mental health. There's study after study after study that shows that walking outside in green spaces, particularly, reduces people's self-reported symptoms of depression, particularly. So this is a really powerful, free, easy way for women to start mitigating some of those mental health issues. I challenge you, if you're listening to this and maybe you've done more intense exercise, or maybe you feel like you need a little bit more exercise in your life, spend 28 days walking outside, 3 20-minute walks outside every single day, and journal about it. Write about it. Ask yourself, are my symptoms of rage, anxiety, and depression even somewhat lessened by these 28 days of walking about 5 miles a day? And then again, can seem overwhelming for, a lot of women who are super busy. So maybe you just start with 5-minute exercise snacks. Maybe you go outside and walk around your block or around your cul-de-sac one time, and then you do it again, and then you do it again, and you're building up this new habit. I've had so many women tell me when this happens, they feel happier. They start losing weight. Their body composition changes, especially if they've been doing more high intensity exercise for a period of time. They sleep better, which is great. And they actually have less need for vitamins like vitamin D. I mean, they're getting outside every single day. This is one of the most powerful things you can do for exercise in perimenopause. And you're exercising an hour a day. It's a lot of exercise.
Yeah, I got to go, Jen. Just give me one. So, and a few paragraphs ago, you mentioned ancestral, what our ancestors did when women congregated in a community. And I really, over the last few years, have just started to talk more about ancestral eating, ancestral movement, what we did as ancestors that we thrived on for thousands of years. And we didn't have Orange Theory 150 years ago. We didn't have CrossFit gyms 150 years ago. But we did have an ability to walk outside, and that's mostly how we got our movement. Mm-hmm. We were outside pretty much all day moving. That's what walking outside is.
Right. So I have to identify this. I'm tapping him, going, it's my turn. So I think you touched on something that's really important, and I have found this to be very helpful for myself. Even when I'm at work, if I'm overwhelmed, I just step outside for just a few minutes, walk around, and then come back in, because it takes away that movement and just giving your brain a break and your body a break to breathe, inhale, because I usually hold my breath a little bit, but breathing, being outside, just that whole experience takes you to a different place. And I think that's one thing about when you're walking and you're outside that's really important. I may not walk as much, but we do cycle. And one of the things that I've realized between Shawn and I is he's about how fast you can get somewhere and, where your heart rate is. And so sometimes I'm like, well, did you see this? And did you see that? And he's like, no. No. And I'm like, you didn't see that? And he goes, and then no. But what I find that happens in my mind is as I'm recognizing something, that's scenic or beautiful, is that problems disappear, right? Like, our brain has this wonderful way of cleaning out the cobwebs or the frustrations that we have, and we let go of things that just really don't matter, right? But I think some of that is because we recognize different things outside that we don't necessarily do inside. Mm-hmm. And I can't, some of it might be personality, but I do think that there's something about, inner therapy without having to talk to other people sometimes, or even I see women talking together as they're walking, but being outside does change a lot for us because, you're in a space that's different than being inside the four walls.
Oh man, I wish we had another hour to talk. I know.
Right? I know. I'm thinking the same thing.
I will tell you guys. So I live in California. I love being natural. Like I I do not wear shoes as much as I possibly can. I will take my meetings out on the porch. I will go walk around as much as I can in between because I hate being inside. I know, the LED lights, the computer screens are not great for me. So that's something I really encourage my women to do as well. Just spend more time outside. What can you do outside that you would normally do inside? Can you take a meeting? Can you call your mom? Can you take the kids outside? Can you work on a paper? Can you, I don't know, chop vegetables and you're like, you're
Right.
I don't care what it is, but can you get outside? You guys know I have 4 kids, and when we were homeschooling them, they were younger. I would see them sitting down to do their work and they get so frustrated. And I started telling them, okay, stop, go run a lap around the cul-de-sac and come back in. That was
I did that a lot.
Yeah, we homeschooled our kids too, and that's what Janet said. Hey, get outside.
Hey, let's go.
And so why are we any different? We're just big kids at heart. We forget.
Yeah.
Forget to play. We forget that we need to be outside. We forget we need to move. And, with regards to exercise too, I see so many women who are exercising just to exercise, check something off their list. But ancestrally and functionally, we need to have strong, capable bodies. So what can you do with regards to exercise that keeps you functioning for as long as possible? Walking and lifting heavy things. That's all you need to do in perimenopause. Walk 10,000 steps a day, lift heavy weights 2 to 3 times a week.
I agree.
Yeah. And I use it as an example when I bring up ancestral living, and that's what we did as ancestors. We our ancestors hundreds of years ago, they walked all day or moved all day,
Right.
and every once in a while, and they lifted all day, and every once in a while they lift something really heavy. I mean, think about it. Think about hunting. You walk all day to track an animal. You sprint for about 30 seconds to catch it or kill it, whatever. And then you have to carry it out. There you go. There's your heavy lifting. That's exactly what we did thousands of years ago. If we can replicate that, we will thrive as humans. And moving into that, diet. Let's talk about diet.
Here's a huge implication for mental health, right? If you are never eating breakfast, surviving all morning on black coffee or, sugary coffee, if you don't get enough protein, you never eat fruits and vegetables, and you aren't eating on a regular schedule, you are inviting anxiety, depression, and rage into your life. That's just the long and short of it. And so many women are simply malnourished. They don't have enough potassium, magnesium, calcium, or iron, which are the 4 elements we need to shut down cravings with regards to minerals. And they don't get enough protein, which is the macronutrient we need to also shut down cravings and balance out our blood sugar. The name of the game in perimenopause with regards to, mood swings is balancing your blood sugar. So simple. This is simple. I want everyone listening to this to realize you need to eat 3 to 4 times a day, a palm-sized serving of protein, a cupped hand of fruit, a fist of vegetables, a thumb of nuts, avocado, or bacon if you want fat. Do that 3 to 4 times a day. And then every once in a while, just enjoy something you want to eat. In my practice, we call this a joy eat, where you don't think about it. It doesn't have to be perfect. You just go out with your husband for a date night. You go to a friend's house and they're serving lasagna and you're like, I'm glad to be in fellowship. I'm glad to be out.
Right. Exactly.
A little bit of lasagna. Like, I'm not depriving myself. But 80% of the time, if you can focus on fat, fiber, and greens, get in your protein, your fruits, your vegetables, a little bit of good fat, you're setting yourself up for balanced blood sugar, balanced weight, balanced mood.
That's true.
And those are and everything you listed are they're whole foods, they're real foods. One of the things we say over and over again, if it doesn't rot, don't eat it. Everything you talked about, is real food that does rot. It's not necessarily, processed or packaged food. And I get it. The definition of that is kind of broad, but, it is important to understand that, portions like you talked about, and that we do need to just eat real food.
I also talk to women a little bit about hydration, and you probably do too, because I think that is something too that helped me even during my pregnancies. Is sometimes we feel like we're hungry or we're craving something, and really we need to hydrate. And that's something I've had to work on for myself as well, is to remember, when we're working and we're doing all this, we need to hydrate. That's really important. And today people are just doing all these fancy drinks and these sodas and all these different drinks out there, but we need real hydration, because that's going to help too with a little bit of your cravings and also how you feel overall, because I know I can bonk just not being hydrated enough. And really, we want to make sure that we are putting the things that we need in our body. And we really do need water. And maybe sometimes we need some electrolytes too that are going to balance that rather than just plain water. Because I think sometimes we just overdo the water.
Yep, we absolutely can. Love that you brought that up, Janet. 100%. I am a proponent of staying hydrated. We know that does quell cravings, but you mentioned a couple of key things in there. One being kind of, cravings, right? Like searching for other things. Like we're in the pantry, we're in the refrigerator when really all we are is thirsty. So this brings up this concept of the nutrient leverage hypothesis, the protein energy hypothesis, two things I love talking about. It essentially says, women are going to search out food until they meet the minimum number of protein grams that they need every day, and until they meet the minimum amount of potassium, calcium, and iron that they need every day. So you also bringing up electrolytes is super important because those are some of the minerals that our body desperately needs. So if you find yourself, drinking enough water, you're drinking like 100, 120 ounces of water a day, but you're still having cravings, or you're still really tired, or you still can't poop, or you still have no energy, consider adding minerals to your water, right? The body really needs those minerals. I like a brand from Adaptive Nutrition because there's 1,000 milligrams of potassium in that. And I find that women are supremely deficient in potassium. You're fine with probably any of the standard electrolyte powders on the market. Just start with, 1 scoop, 1 serving a day and see, does your energy get better? Does your sleep get better? Does your poop get better? Those things are going to suffer if you're not sufficiently, in line with the electrolyte needs of your body.
Yeah, I think the electrolyte thing is important. And also I'm with you. It's I don't necessarily think it's one brand is necessarily better than the others. And I know there's a lot of it seems like on social media right now, there's a lot of hate going around with some of the those companies calling each other names and stuff because they're bad. But realize that you still have to focus on the other good things. I mean, you can supplement with electrolytes, but still focus on the other good things. Like, for instance, you mentioned iron, you mentioned protein. One of the best ways, probably the best way to get iron and protein is red meat. There is no other better way, in my opinion.
Yep. And if we're talking about mental health, Dr. Georgia Ede of Diagnosis Diet has some really great information on this. She's got a blog post called Meet the Original Human Superfood ? The answer is a firm exclamation point. It actually is the original human superfood. It contains more vitamins and minerals ounce per ounce than any other food. And some of the more important minerals for mental health, including B12 and zinc, are only available in that heme iron that we get in red meat, as opposed to, the iron that we can get from plant food. So if you're, into it, go look up that article, look up Dr. Georgia Ede. She's got a great book that just came out too on mental health and diet, where she talks about, balance out your blood sugar, get enough protein, make sure you're not, overindulging in caffeine and alcohol and sugar. And as humans, we probably know these things to be true. We probably realize we should be eating more whole foods and being outside a little bit more, but there's a disconnect between hearing those things and actually implementing them into a busy woman's life. So if we have another 2 minutes, maybe we could talk about practical strategies to get those things in.
I was just thinking about that.
Let's do it.
Because one thing I would say is, first of all, I'll tell you what Janet and I do. We only buy good food. We just don't buy junk food, because if we did buy junk food, the processed box stuff, we would eat it. I guarantee you I would. She is better at self-control than I am. But if we bought Oreos, we bought Doritos, we bought Cheetos, I would eat them, especially once I get started on them. So we just don't buy those. So, and then we prepare things in advance. So a lot of times on Saturday or Sunday or Monday, it just depends. We always cook like 2 big ribeyes. I wouldn't say always, but this is an example. We cook 2 big ribeyes. Usually we can only eat half of one each. So then we have leftover ribeye for when we get home from work the next day. We can cut it up and put it in fajitas. And I know all you people out there say that's a waste of ribeye. Hey, it makes good fajitas, let me tell you. So, those are things that we do. We cook up 2 to 3 pounds of ground beef. And then it's already cooked. And then when you get home, you can make tacos with it. You can make whatever. I mean, we do all kinds of stuff with ground beef. So we just make it easy. Cut up some vegetables, saute up some vegetables with the ground beef. You've got a meal.
Absolutely. I love this. Meal prep is the busy woman's best friend, just like you guys
Yeah.
were saying. Get 3 or 4 pounds of meat from the grocery store, get some veggies that you and your kids will eat, get a bowl and put fruit out in that bowl, get some nuts and put them into single serving Ziploc bags, get some Chomps beef jerky sticks, get some avocado, like 100 calorie packs of guacamole. I mean, all of these are whole foods that you can put in your refrigerator. And as I tell my clients, almost make a charcuterie board every single day. I've got,
I was just gonna, when you were saying it, we're taking the words out of each other's mouth, because I was thinking charcuterie board. We do that all the time as our appetizer for dinner, because it's easy. Cut up some cheese, cut up some meat, have a few crackers. We put, I don't know, olives on there, whatever, and it's just it's amazing.
So easy and so nourishing. And again, you don't have to be perfect with your diet. I can, hear my women kind of saying, well, do I have to eat this way for the rest of my life? Like, do I have to be gluten-free for the rest of my life? And the answer is no, right? Again, can you give yourself about 80%, compliance with a healthy, protein-rich whole foods diet? Like, that is enough. And if you meal prep, that's going to be super helpful. If you're eating out, you have that same formula. You start with meat, you start with a protein. You can get that anywhere, right? If you are plant-based, then we can do a different show on that. But for the most part, especially if you're struggling with mental health, I recommend that my women are getting red meat. You can do fish if you want to. Chicken and turkey are probably fine, but really getting red meat in once or even twice a day can be super helpful if you're dealing with that anxiety, depression, or rage. But just having everything in your fridge and your pantry being ready for you, especially if you can take an extra 20 minutes and portion them into single serving meal containers or Ziploc bags. You literally just pull things out of your fridge or pantry, throw them in your purse, and you can even eat on the road. I don't recommend that, but you can, because I know that you're busy, right? If you can couple that with getting 3 10-minute walks, 3 20-minute walks before or after your meals. I've got this amazing client who was like, Jennifer, I work in an office all day long. How am I going to get outside? So her recommendation, her suggestion, I didn't even come up with this. Instead of going to the bathroom from her cubicle to the bathroom door every single day, she walks outside the building, goes all the way around, enters the building again, uses the restroom, and goes back the same way. She has to go pee, 2-3 times a day. And now she gets an extra 30 minutes of outside time and walking just by that simple hack. So be creative, in how you're pulling these things into your life. But if you have an extra 30 minutes a day, and I know you do, get off Instagram, get off Facebook.
Right. All of us do.
Right. And just start implementing these little things, little snacks of protein, little snacks of exercise, little snacks of outside time. They soon start growing into healthy habits that you can do long term.
Absolutely.
So kind of piggyback on something you said earlier about letting go of some things. I think that was something really important for me, that I, as a busy individual, when you're working and you've got kids and you got a spouse and you have relationships with other people, sometimes we do take on more than we need. And giving ourselves permission to let go of some things. And I think you hit something really smart or wise, is that we probably recognize when we are going to struggle. And so give yourself the permission to let go of some things. You don't always have to be that mom, right? And it's okay to tell people, hey, I need to step back a little bit and I'm going to let this one go. And I feel like that's something that we have to give our permission to ourselves first and then walk through it.
I love that you said that. Our calling really is to take care of our families and ourselves, right? And then push out with that extra energy that we have. If we have that extra energy, it's really hard for women who've been used to doing all of the things to maybe pull back. But I'm fond of the quote, no is a complete sentence. I can't do that. Or, I'd love to do that, but I don't want to. And there was a time in my life, in the last 10 years, I stopped bringing meals to people who had a baby. I stopped serving in the church nursery. Like, those things hurt my heart to do. Like, that was my identity. I did those things. But once I realized, gosh, I will do those things and I'll do them well, but at the expense of taking care of my children, at the expense of taking care of myself. I throw all 4 kids in the car, we bring somebody meal, and on the way home, I'm yelling at them because we're all hungry and we're all tired. What purpose does that serve? Like, how is that actually, furthering my family goals, my health goals? It doesn't. So if that's you, and maybe you have the capacity to do all those things, but if you find yourself kind of struggling, and feeling resentful and bitter, like, we're not called to serve from a bitter heart, we're called to serve from a joyful heart. So you can do that, but only if you are already taking good care of yourself first. And it's okay just to say no.
That's right. That's absolutely right. I love that. I love that. Well, Jennifer, as we wrap this podcast up, I just want to thank you for being on. And I want to thank you for your wisdom and knowledge and for everything that you do to teach women how to be healthy during perimenopause and menopause and postmenopause. So thank you for that. And as we wrap up, I would like you to just in maybe 2 sentences, what's the most important thing during menopause and mental health?
Great. Yes. Get outside as much as you possibly can and eat animal protein 3 times a day.
Pretty simple. I love it. All right. Well, thank you so much for being on as we wrap this episode 10 up of our Women's Health series. Thank you so much, Jennifer.
Thank you both for having me. It's always a pleasure to be chatting with you too.